Good morning, everybody. Is it morning? It's not morning there. I think it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Daphne James, and I work in the admissions office at the LSU Law Center, which you can see behind me. I'm delighted that you guys decided to join us today to talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. Sometimes it's a daunting task to have to reach out to professors or to former employers or current employers or anybody really for a letter of recommendation. But hopefully today, when we discuss some of the things that you should do and shouldn't do in the process, this will help you to navigate that whole asking process. So I want you guys to, if you have questions during the presentation, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I would really love to hear your voices. So you can raise your hand and ask questions. The presentation isn't very long, but it is designed to give you some basic information and hopefully get you to thinking about what it is you need to do to make sure you secure wonderful letters of rec. One thing I will say is that obviously I'm from the law school. So yeah, I'm talking about law school letters of recommendation, but the tools that you will see and the information you'll get, they will be useful for getting letters of recommendation from any person at any time for anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a law school letter of rec process. So thank you guys again for joining us. Okay, so making the ask, we are going to talk a little bit about securing stellar law school recommendations. Of course, now I know that there can be some issues with securing stellar recommendations simply because of the fact that you know you're supposed to ask them for the letters, but you don't know what they're going to write about for you. So hopefully this will help you to kind of figure out how to let them know what to do. So who should you ask for letters of recommendation? I think that most law schools will agree, or most law school reps would agree if you meet with them, that academic letters of recommendation are what we want the most. Those are the most helpful. Whether you have a 4.0 GPA or a 2.0 GPA, academic letters are what we prefer to see. Because we're not only gauging your ability to take an exam, we want professors to talk about your potential for success in law school. We want them to talk about how well you participated in class, how well you wrote. We want them to give personal anecdotes if that is something that you know that they can do for you. So and that's one of the things when you approach your professors or the others we have listed, supervisors or volunteer coordinators, that you mention to them that you want the letter to be about you and how you contributed to their classroom environment, to your work environment, or as a volunteer. So if you reach out to a supervisor, it can be from if you worked wherever you worked while you were in undergraduate or graduate or whatever level you happen to be, or the letter could actually come from an internship that you had, or if you worked on campus, obviously from someone there. And then volunteer coordinator. So if you volunteered at an animal shelter or you volunteered, with CASA or any type of organization where you donated and dedicated your time to something that you're passionate about, you can have someone write for you. A lot of times, so like if you're in an on-campus organization or you're in like a sorority or if you're a member of the I don't know, the pickup trash club. I don't know what the name of it would be, but that's what I'm calling it. But you can, whoever is your advisor for that, that could be the volunteer coordinator that you reach out to. So don't shy away from those. The preference, of course, is academic. But if you have one academic and one from a volunteer coordinator or supervisor, that can be great. Now, you will, of course, want to make sure you adhere to the rules and regulations of the school to which you're applying. For LSU, for example, we require 2 letters of recommendation, but we will accept up to 3. So make sure that you know those things once you're making that decision. And if there's any doubt about what type of letter to get, err on the side of professional letter from a professor, as opposed to work or volunteer coordinator. One thing I do want to say about that is that professors in general are probably more acquainted with what types of letters other professional programs want to see. So, because they've gone through the process of applying to those programs previously, so they may have a better idea. And some of them may actually sit on admissions committees at your school. So definitely, think about that. Who not to ask? Family and friends. While I know that your Mimi, Mama, Nana, grandmother loves you, you probably don't need to have her writing a letter of recommendation for you. I promise you that schools are going to frown upon that. Even if your family or friends are actually lawyers or judges or politicians or professors, even, they are definitely not your strongest option for letters of rec. Politicians and public figures, sometimes people think, oh, wow, I think that I can get a letter. My uncle works for the governor. He can get me a letter of rec from the governor. And so definitely that's going to be impressive. That's probably not going to be impressive because what's going to happen is that letter is going to end up being about your uncle or whoever actually has the connection to the person. um, Even if you know the person, then a lot of times, like I've read several that said, oh, well, this person's been my daughter's best friend since kindergarten, and I've watched her grow up and she's smart. And maybe they know those things, but it comes off as, oh, well, just let her in law school because she's friends with my daughter. So definitely try to stay away from family, friends, politicians, and public figures. And then we told you, yeah, professors, that's who you need, employers, yeah, but not if, like, for example, um, Priya, is it Priya?
Yes.
So Priya is a graduate assistant and she's working in the department where she is. And she may have a direct supervisor, but the department head might not be the person that works with her. Well, she wouldn't go and ask that person for a letter of recommendation. She would go with the person who actually knows her and knows her work ethic and knows about what she's doing. And then professors, if you went to a class and you had one of those really large classes, for example, you love the professor, but the professor doesn't know you, and you did really well in the class, that wouldn't be the person to go and ask. You need to talk with someone with whom you've had an opportunity to establish a rapport. And that's very, very important. For those of you that are freshmen, sophomores, you have the opportunity to start that foundational relationship with a professor that it might be a person you think is really cool. You can start talking to that person about what you're going to do with your future and start talking with them now about, hey, I may want to have you write a letter of rec for me at some point. But they will know you and you will be able to reach out to that person for something. But if it's somebody that you barely interacted with, definitely that's not the way to go. So, Priya, do we have any questions in the chat or anything like that?
Not so far.
Okay, great. So just remember about the who not to ask. I think a little bit later on we'll have a slide. It'll give you a what's the word? Like the approach that you want to take, because surprisingly, some people ask people, and you have professors or employers who don't know you that well, but will say yes because they feel like they should. But then it comes across in the letter that they don't know you, and that's not what we want. I read a letter in this last application cycle. So for law school, the application cycles are typically from September or October to I have some colleagues that accept applications as late as July. So basically the academic period prior to the when you want to start. So the academic year prior to when you want to start. But anyway, that letter basically said, I don't know this student very well, and I'm not totally sure why they asked me to write a letter of recommendation. That is not what a law school admissions committee member or any graduate program committee member wants to see in the beginning of a letter from someone for you. So definitely kind of think about that. If you have a pre-law advisor on your campus, lean on that person as well. One thing that I have seen over the years doing this job is there are professors that people traditionally reach out to for letters of recommendation. A lot of law school applicants are going to come from similar majors, and they may have taken classes with some of the same professors. Sometimes your pre-law advisor may know a little bit about that person's writing style, a little bit about how they want to be approached to answer questions or to be asked for letters of rec. We have a couple that I can think of right off the top of my head from LSU and maybe one other school that we get letters from that person a lot, but they don't write a lot of information. It's basically like, hey, I'm endorsing them. They're good. You should let them in. They're cool people. I know one time I got a letter from this one of the ones in particular, and they put like an extra little paragraph in there that made me pay attention to that person more because I was used to seeing those letters. By the same token, I know none of you would do this, but I'm going to mention it because we also had a case this past year where there was a question about whether the letter had been written by the person whose name was on the letter. I did mention to you guys that we have people that we see letters from often, and we are, or we may have professors on the committee with relationships with some of these people. Remember, academia is big, but it is small, and professors in certain areas know one another. Just try to be authentic. Make sure that you don't, oh, well, they told me they would write a letter for me, but they didn't get a chance to do it, so I'm just going to write it and put their name on it. Or something, or I have a copy of what they sent me when I applied to XYZ scholarship. So I'm just going to change it and try to send that to LSAC. That's not a good look. So I just want to make sure I mention that to you guys. So when to ask? You got in your mind, I am going to law school. I am going to be a stellar law student one day, but I got to get some stellar letters of recommendation. Well, if you know far in advance, like right now, if you're a junior, you want to go to law school, you have some time to ask a recommender for a letter. So, and if you're a freshman or sophomore that I mentioned about establishing that rapport, and you've already done that, and same for everybody else too, but then you already know, hey, they already have it in their mind that I'm going to ask them. So I can go ahead and, you have already done it. So you'll know who you can reach out to. But you want to try at least a month or better, a month and a half, um, to ask those letters. And it needs to be before your earliest application deadline. So if you're applying to schools, for example, that have early admit decisions, where they say, okay, if you have your app in by this date, we'll give you a decision by this date. Be sure that you're requesting those letters early enough to meet that standard. If you're planning to submit your application by March 1st, then in January, you want to reach out to your potential recommenders at that time. So just kind of gauge it. And sometimes it depends on the relationship. I think, so Priya, how big is the University of Central Florida? How many students? Do you know how many students you guys have?
We definitely have well into the thousands of students. We're a very big campus.
So, if you're at a large campus that your classmates are also looking for letters of recommendation, whether it's for law school, graduate school, medical school, jobs, what have you. So you're competing against other people to get these letters of recommendation. So you want to give those professors time to actually work on a letter, and you want to give them time enough to do a good letter of recommendation for you. Um, One of the pro tips that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is that, if you have a project that you just did or some big thing, or you're in their class, or you were in the class over the summer, maybe over the summer, talk to them and say, hey, I'm going to come to you in the fall and ask you for a letter of recommendation. So make sure that it's when you're fresh in their minds, especially if it's not someone who's serving as a mentor to you. You have an ongoing relationship with them. If it's someone that you had a relationship during class, but you didn't, you hadn't reached out to them before, and you probably aren't taking them again, but you think they write a good letter, make sure you approach them at that time. Because remember, we always think, oh, those professors know me. I answer questions. I'm this, I'm that. But you have to remember that every semester they're teaching multiple classes and they have multiple students. It's just one of them. Yes, you remember them and remember how awesome they are, but it's just one of them and then several of you. So just kind of think about that. You want to definitely avoid last minute requests if you can. Now, if you're under pressure, you had someone like I know this happens to people. You may have someone who's going to write a letter for you. They say, I'm working on it, and it gets so much closer to the deadline and you're panicking. I need a letter. If you have to, then you can do a last minute request. We're going to talk about how to ask in another slide, but make sure, be very apologetic to that person if you do, and definitely explain to them that, maybe you just decided that you wanted to apply to this program or whatever. But at all, not all costs, but most costs, try to avoid asking for a letter of recommendation at the last minute, because a lot of people are busy and they don't have time to just, you know, take one day and write a letter of recommendation for you. They may need a couple of weeks to make that happen. So, how to ask? I know that there are so many different ways to approach someone to ask for a letter of recommendation, but if possible, ask them in person. Make an appointment during the professor's office hours, or if it's going to be a volunteer supervisor, make an appointment with them when they're available and talk to them at that time about what it is that that you want them to write the letter for. So it makes it a whole lot more personable. It then also gives them another opportunity to put a face to the name, especially if, like the last slide, is someone that you're in their class but you didn't have a rapport with them previously, but you have a good rapport now and you really want them to write a letter for you. Definitely you want to make an in-person plea to that person. If it's a mentor, it's different because you have an established relationship. So it's awesome to do it in person, but for them, you already know the best way that the two of you communicate. You might have a mentor that you meet with over Zoom once a month, but you're texting all the time. And it might be okay for that person because you have that relationship. So think about the relationship that you have with the person prior to asking, and try to come up with a good mechanism for the ask. But if possible, an in person ask is what you actually want to do. You can do a professional email. Here's the big question that it's hard to ask: would you feel comfortable writing a letter of recommendation for me, a strong letter of recommendation? Because nobody wants to get told, like, nah, baby, I don't want to write a strong letter for you. I can't because you're weak. Who wants to hear that? But you definitely want to make sure that you pick the people who are going to write the best possible letters of recommendation for you. That's why I think that it's important to, like I said, meet with your pre-law advisor, or if you have some other, like just your program advisor, and they may be able to talk to you about who's a solid writer. I know when I was in graduate school, my professor that I worked for, I wrote their letters of recommendation for them a lot of times. And just like they may have given me some information, and I think I'm a strong letter of recommendation writer. But, then have them look over it and make sure that they don't think I'm lying about about how awesome somebody is. And then they would just sign it. So you want to kind of just make sure that you're selecting someone that if you hear about it, they write great letters of rec, and make sure that the person would feel comfortable writing a letter for you. I think that sometimes we think the professors think we're totally awesome. They feel like they don't know us well enough, or they don't think we're as awesome as we think we are. So, and I've over the years read some very interesting letters that talked about people's performance in class and how, eh, they can't in clear conscience give them the strongest letter. Also, one thing that we'll talk about is what to provide for the recommender. But I want to mention right now that talk to the recommender about where you're applying to law school, if you know anything about the culture of that law school or the programming at that school, or if there's something that you're particularly interested in at that particular school, let your recommender know. I had a letter of recommendation from a young lady several years ago, and the recommender talked about how, oh, they would be such an awesome student at a school with a strong this, this, and this. And I give them the highest glowing recommendation for that, blah, 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 blah. LSU was not a school that had this, this, and this to offer. So in the mind of the reader, the professors that are on the admissions committee, the admissions professionals who are on the committee, we then took that because it was from somebody that we trusted. We then took that and said, well, this may not be the fit for you because every school is not going to be your fit, but this may not be the fit for you. So make sure that you talk to your recommenders about that too, especially to me, if it's a person that mentors you or just someone that knows you worked for a long time, they know you really well, because you want to make sure that they're getting you together for whatever school it is that you're applying to attend. And then follow up. So once you go in and you ask, hey, can you write this letter for me? I'm awesome. And they say, oh, most definitely. Follow up, send an email confirming the deadline dates, confirming the process. The process will be the same for law school applications. Typically, they will all go through the Law School Admissions Council's credential assembly service. So all the letters will go there. But confirm all those things and then ask, in addition to just confirming, make sure that you ask them, is there anything else you need from me? Before you start writing this letter, and tell them that you're happy to meet with them again if they want to ask you additional questions about anything. Definitely make yourself available. So what do you provide with them? You've gone out and you've asked them 6 to 8 weeks in advance. You met with them, you had your little meeting, you did your follow-up email, and in your follow-up email, these are some things that you can provide. Now, you can also provide these things prior to your ask meeting, especially if it's for someone that doesn't know you quite as well. But if it's someone that knows you very well, you can then send these things a little bit later because they may say, hey, I really don't need this thing, but definitely send me that. But you want to make it all available to them. So you want to, if there are any specific instructions that you have, you definitely want to send those. An unofficial transcript, more than welcome to do that. Because I think that professors obviously will know how well you did in their classes, but they may not know your overall performance in classes. And they may be interested to see, well, hey, you were in Professor James's class, and so I'm writing your letter, and I know this about you, but hey, you took Professor Abad's class, my colleague, and I want to see how well you did in their class because they grade even harder than I do. So that'll help me to write a letter, to form some of my academic commentary about you. And so you can provide a resume or a CV. Most of us, if we're an undergrad, we have just a resume. We don't really have a CV yet because we haven't done enough stuff to present a CV. But if you're in grad school, professional school, and you're applying to another professional program, or if you're returning to grad school and you've done some different things and maybe gotten some things published, some undergrads have to, then a CV would be fine. The not CB, a CV, a curriculum vitae. And if you want to provide any other type of information, you can. Some recommenders may ask that you provide, I don't know, some other thing to them, like if you want to tell them, hey, I've taken 4 of your classes, just to kind of make it easy. They don't have to go through your whole transcript. Hey, I took 4 classes with you. Here's what they were. Here's what I got. Here's what my paper topic was I got an A on, or whatever it is that you want to share. But definitely pay attention to what the recommenders are asking. Now, one thing I always have to tell the law students that we have, even though you think it would be just a given, check your email regularly. Make sure you're paying attention to your email, the email address that you've given to people that you want to do something for you, so that if they're reaching out to you to say, hey, you sent me this link, but it really didn't come through, or my computer crashed, or whatever, you want to make sure that you're doing that and you're responding in a timely fashion. Because if you ask me to do something for you, I give you a not deadline, but I tell you, hey, okay, I'm going to reach back out to you. I reach out to you in a week and you take 2 weeks to get back to me. That gives me some other clues about you. Are you a person who does things in a timely fashion? Are you prompt? Do you pay attention to detail? So definitely, once you've made that ask, confirmed, and you're following up, make sure that you continue to check your email, check your text, whatever process you're using, and respond in a timely fashion. Common mistakes to avoid. Obviously, we've talked about a little bit of this, but waiting too long to ask someone for a letter of recommendation. Try to avoid that. Try to avoid choosing a big name over someone who knows you. You want a thoughtful letter of recommendation, and you want them to know who you are. Like I said, a lot of times when we get letters from, you worked at XYZ law firm, and instead of asking the lowly lawyer that you worked for, you want a partner to write for you because maybe your parents know the partner. Well, that's not really the best thing to do because they're not going to be able to write as thoughtful of a letter for you. And I've read many that were about them and not about you. I've been a lawyer for this long. I went to law school here. I know this and I've done that. And I researched this way. And I met this person and I think that she is probably going to follow in my footsteps and do all the same stuff. So let her in. And that told me nothing about you. So definitely think about that. Um, don't waive your right to read the letter. Is something that when I was doing some research, and when I've done research for this particular topic over the years, it's just been a comment to do that because all of the professionals who counsel students on this agree that your better letters of recommendation will probably come when you waive your right. Don't forget to follow up. Don't forget to write a thank you note to your recommender. And don't provide them with incomplete information or some disorganized set of materials. Make sure that it is clear what they're reading. So a good example, so we mentioned previously that you could send a personal statement, a copy of your personal statement. Well, make sure that it's the personal statement that you want to share with them, not the rough draft that you were working on where you got like scratch outs, not the one where you put insert school name here or whatever. Make sure you give them something clear and clean. If you're asking them to write uh, a letter for you and you want them to know more about you than what you have in your personal statement, you could give it an additional statement. But you could say, hey, this is my generic personal statement I'm using at all law schools, but here's an additional statement that I prepared as a as an optional essay for a school. LSU, for example, requires that students submit a personal statement. And then also you have to do a why LSU statement that talks a little bit about what you're going to bring to the university. And then you can also mention, what you hope to get from it. So that's something else that you could share with your recommender, but make sure you label it. Personal statement, why LSU statement, why XYZ school statement, so that that will help your recommender to be able to easily go to that data. I have your name on it because you put your name on it. Don't leave it blank. Because like I said, recommenders may be writing for several people. Put your name on it. Just make it clear so that they know exactly who it's for and label what it is. Resume, obviously, we know it's a resume. But if it's an optional, if you're writing some type of optional essay, make sure that you label that. So, and try to do it all in one time. When you send the email saying, hey, thanks so much for agreeing, here's some items that might help you make a decision. Put all of your items in that one email. Now, if the recommender obviously comes back and says, hey, you know what, I really would love to see, could you send me an excerpt from the paper you wrote for my class or whatever, then respond that way. But otherwise, put it all in one spot. So some final tips for you when you're getting and securing those stellar letters of recommendation. You want to thank your recommenders when they agree to write for you, and then after they submit the letters of recommendation, send them something else. One thing that I know from personal experience is that this may not be the last time that you ask for a letter of recommendation from that person. So you want them to know that you are grateful, and that if you come back later and ask for an additional letter for some other program or whatever, they're going to remember how nice you were, and they're going to want to try and write another letter for you. You want to keep them updated. You know, you get accepted to your dream school and they've written a letter for you. Say, hey, you know, thank you so much for having written this letter. I just wanted to share with you. I got accepted to 4 of the 5 schools to which I applied and got waitlisted at one. I know that, that decision that the schools made, your letter of recommendation helped to influence it, and I'm eternally grateful. But recommenders like to know that, because it helps them to, maybe they're going through a process where they're changing the way that they write letters, or they have a form letter or whatever. That way they know they're effective. So definitely reach out. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, maintain connections with them, with the people that write the letters for you, because this may be valuable for you throughout your process, not only in getting a letter written, but if it's someone that you're taking a class with, because sometimes we don't know everything. I had a professor who was a PhD and also a JD, which I didn't know that. But you may have someone write for you, and they may have a degree in what you're seeking, so they may be able to help you throughout your journey, not just getting into law school, but looking for and securing employment, whether it's for the summer or during your semesters in law school or even after. So maybe they might be able to write something for you to help you get another job later. If applying for multiple programs, make sure, if it's like a joint degree program or something like that, if you're asking the same person to write a letter for you, try to make sure that you coordinate your requests. Don't say, okay, well, then 2 weeks, then I'm going to go and ask you because I'm also applying the MBA, and I thought you could write a letter for me for the MBA program. Talk about all that stuff up front because usually, if you know you're going to law school, if you're doing it and you know up front, have that conversation. There will be times, of course, when you can't, because you may decide during law school that you want to apply to a graduate or a joint degree program in your area. So you may have to go back to the professor. But my recommendation too is if you think that you thought that you might want to do a joint degree, when you have that initial ask and have that initial conversation, talk with the professor at that time about the fact that you are strongly considering a JD and a master's in public policy. You haven't totally decided yet, but would they be comfortable if you reached out to them for both letters of recommendation? And that way you're putting that out into the atmosphere. If you do that, when you write your thank you note, okay, make sure you say thanks for definitely writing this law school letter of rec for me and considering uh, writing a letter for me when I approach you in a year for the master's program or whatever your process is. I'm sure you guys will have a session maybe at some point on that type of thing about the joint degree programs at different places, and maybe someone will talk to you about the process for applying. Um, in addition to that, you want to make sure that you trust the process. You know, you get your letters of recommendation asked for a few weeks in advance because you want to give them time. Then you can work on all those other things that you have to work on for your application, whether it's continuing to prep for the professional exam that you need to take, if the school requires an LSAT, or if they'll take a GRE or whatever it is, JD Next, that you're prepping for, whatever it is, and working on your personal statements that you're going to submit to those particular schools. And so that concludes my presentation for today. I want to thank you guys for attending and for listening and hopefully learning a little bit. At this point, I'd like to open it up if there are any questions that anyone has, and I can answer those for you.
So we did have a question in the chat from Ariana.
Mhm.
She said, do I need to ask for letters of recommendation for every school? Or can I use the same set of letters of recommendations for multiple applications? What is more recommended?
So if you're applying to law school, most of the law schools, almost all the law schools that I know of, use the credential assembly service that is provided through the Law School Admissions Council. With that service, you can only submit, I think, 4 letters of recommendation. Now, can you have a specific letter? Like if it's your school, this is the school I really want to go to, and you have a professor that you want to write specifically for that school, you can have that letter submitted through LSAC as well, through the Credential Assembly Service. But when it comes down to selecting which letters you get sent where, make sure that you have that letter only sent to the school that recommender is writing, for which that recommender is writing. So, don't have it sent to LSU if it's a letter that's really, being written for Kansas State. So just kind of keep that in mind. In addition to that, though, reach out to the law schools to which you're applying, because there may be some that will take letters directly from a recommender. Most of us kind of frown up on that, and people send letters to our deans and stuff anyway, but check with the law schools too, because they may say, well, yeah, you can go ahead if it's specific for this school, you can go ahead and have it sent.
So we also had another question. Somebody was asking, does LSU offer a part-time program?
Yeah. LSU's program is strictly full-time. We don't have a part-time option at this time.
And then another person was asking, the recommendation letters, do they all need to be physically mailed, or can letters be emailed by the recommenders?
So when they come from, with the process that you're going to use, there's going to be a form through the Credential Assembly Service that you'll send to all of your recommenders And I am not certain, but I think that it gives them the option to upload electronically, or if they have to be old school, maybe they can mail it. But I think that they definitely have the option to just upload that form and their letter on the site.
I'm not seeing another question, but I had a question.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if you could maybe touch on what kind of skills you are like LSU would be looking for from applicants that you would want them to look for in their professors. So, for example, like if you're looking for writing skills, communication skills, what kind of recommenders would you recommend that the students look for to kind of display those skills?
Well, so like most law schools and LSU included, we're looking for people that have effective communication skills. Law school, what you're going to do most is write, research and write. So if you have awesome writing skills, that's something that we're looking for. Now, when I say awesome, if you're a pretty good writer, um, then that's a thing to have, but you don't have to be a legal writer. There's a difference between, creative writing and legal writing and writing for copy for the newspaper or writing for a journalistic presentation. Um, so communication, that's a big one. Obviously, communication verbally or non-verbally, either of those things, because not everyone is verbal. We're also looking for active listeners. We want people that are going to pay attention and are going to soak up what's being said. Not that you heard, but that you listened as well. Um, in addition to that, we're looking for really, punctual folks. There are a lot of different things that we're looking for. I think that when you talk with your recommender, though, you want to talk about them playing up the skill set that they've had the opportunity to observe. So if it's a history professor, for example, where you had to write some scholarly paper, then they're going to talk. You want to talk to them about talking about how awesome your writing skills are. If it's an employer and in that particular job you were a customer service representative, well, you want to talk about how quickly were you able to, and at any job really, learn what the job is or what the product was that you were selling, whether you were punctual, whether you paid attention to if you had guests. So if you were a server or something, or if you had clients wherever you worked, how well you paid attention to them. So kind of, I guess, Priya, in a way, look at who it is and then look at what the skill set is that you needed for that particular thing. And then that's what you want to ask them to, if you're having that one-on-one ask conversation, that's what you want to ask them to talk about or focus on rather.
Thank you. And then we also had another question. Would you recommend asking for recommendation letters or mentioning that you want to get a recommendation letter from the professor prior to the class start so that they can keep that in mind throughout the course?
Well, it depends on if you know them. Like, don't just walk up to the professor, and be like, look, hey, I'm taking your class because I need you to write a letter for me one day. Keep that in mind. Um, but yes, if it's a class that you're taking and you're meeting with the professor early on, you can start talking about it, sort of like um, helping you to kind of get to know them. Don't just go the first day though and ask, I'm really just doing this because I need a letter of recommendation. But definitely you could reach out and say, hey, I know maybe it's the spring and you're graduating the following spring. You could mention, hey, over the summer, I'm going to finalize my list of law school applications, and I'd like to be able to reach back out to you to write a letter of recommendation for me. So that's perfectly cool.
I'm not seeing another question, but I have another question. Is there
Okay.
any recommendation letters that you've seen that you were really impressed by? And if so, what qualities of those made them impressive?
Well, that's a very good question. Um, we tend to be impressed. So when professors write for you and put their program in context a little bit sometimes too, but put in context your performance in comparison to other students that have taken the class. Like we like to know, hey, this person's in the top 10% of the people that I've ever taught, or whatever. That always stands out. When a professor can talk about the process for your research. So like if you're a science major and you did a project in that particular class, and the professor can talk about your relationship with the group that you work with, or about your relationship with them while going through the project, that's always cool. I think that the best letters of recommendation for me are letters that say, hey, I know this person because they come to my office hours and we have intellectual discussions about different things. And then maybe talk about what the person wrote about and how well they wrote. I I can think of maybe one or two that came from a professor that taught the student in more than one course, and they were able to talk about their progression. When they came to me, they were a good student and a decent writer. I remember XYZ paper they wrote probably after the person gave them a little sample. And then what the progress was like. Well, they started out shy. And by the end of it, they were, serving as a mentor for peers in the class. I asked them to come back and talk to my class, that kind of thing. So those have been some of the things that we've seen that we've been impressed with in letters of rec, which is a part of the reason why you ask if the person can write a strong letter for you, because I've also seen the flip side of that where the professors were sort of like, yeah. I mean, they made a C in my class, so I don't know why I was the one they chose. Like, and yeah.
We did have another question. Somebody, I think they're asking about the credential assembly service. They're saying if rec letters are typically sent by a recommender to the school, or are letters sent to the student and then the student submits them throughout their application process, or does it depend on the school?
So most of the 180 plus ABA accredited law schools are going to require that your letters of recommendation go through the credential assembly service with through the Law School Admissions Council. So like when you register to take the LSAT, if you're taking it during the time frame that you're going to apply to law school, you want to also register with the Credential Assembly Service. And just like the Common App that you use for undergrad, it is going to do exactly what it says. It is assembling credentials. So your letters of rec will go through this service, and there will be a form that you'll send to the recommender. The recommender will then send that form and the letter to the schools, not the schools, to the Credential Assembly Service. They in turn then send them to the schools to which you're applying. Um, you can obviously check with individual schools to see if they will allow the letters to come directly to them from your recommender. We don't typically want them from you. That's not the traditional route. But check on the lsac.org website, and it'll talk to you a little bit about the Credential Assembly Service. Find out how long the subscription is good. It is something for which you'll have to pay unless you're able to get a waiver. And there's a process on there to talk about how you can get a fee waiver for it. But they will send your letters of rec. They're the ones that are going to send your LSAT score to the schools. You're going to send your transcripts from every school or college or university you attended. You're going to send your transcripts to them for evaluation. So almost everything that's every school's going to get will go through them. You're also going to apply for law schools using that service. You will have one common application that you'll fill out, and then you'll select schools to which you're applying, and you'll answer. There may be some school specific questions for some of them, but your basic information will be populated on each school's application.
We also had another question from Talia. She said, I know that you mentioned not to pick a professor if they didn't know you personally or well enough to write a personal letter. With that said, would a law school be very opposed to seeing two recommendation letters from different employers, even though they would be able to write a better letter rather than a potential professor?
I don't think that we'd be opposed to it, but I will tell you, put your GPA in context with that particular school. So if you're applying to a school where the median GPA is a 3.8 and you have a 3.5, you need a letter of recommendation from someone else too, preferably a professor. So that would be my suggestion. Now, if you can't, that's a whole nother story. Don't, if you can't get one, that's different. I would suggest to try and diversify if at all possible. So if you can get a volunteer letter, that would be cool too, and an employer letter. And law schools also will look to see, for most of you guys, you're in school currently. But let's say you decide, you know what, hey, I don't apply to law school in a couple of years, take some years off. Then we don't expect academic letters of recommendation as much if you've taken like a two-year gap or something like that. But by the same token, I didn't mention this. I do recommend that if you know you're going to take a gap year and you know you're going to apply to law school, that you reach out to the professors before you graduate and talk to them about the fact that you're taking a gap year. And after that gap is over, you would like to come back to them and have them write a letter for you. So, there are two ways that, that schools can look at it. But if you absolutely cannot access a letter of recommendation from a professor, then it's good to do one from an employer, one from a volunteer org. But I will say that it's August. So if you're in school right now, you have time to identify somebody before it's time for you to have all your letters of recommendation in to apply for law school. So right now is the time that you could actually start working that out and see like who would I want to approach, because you have a little bit of time right now. It's only August 26th.
And then we have one more question. Natalia also said, I remember you mentioning that you suggest we do not waive our rights to read the letter. In doing this after the letter is submitted by the professor to the LSAC, would this give us the ability to remove the letter from the system if we don't like it?
Well, no, I don't. If you say you don't want to read it, how do you know what I don't know. How would you know what it said if you didn't like it? That's just a recommendation. Some professors, some people will say you waive it, but they'll still send you a copy of it. I know that I've seen that a lot of times. But I guess there's really not a way to do that. That's why you want to make sure you're choosing wisely the persons that you're asking to write letters for you. And you want to make sure that you put that caveat. Can you feel comfortable writing a positive letter of recommendation for me? I know it's hard to ask that kind of a question, but it's better to ask it up front than to have recommenders at different schools reading your letter saying, oh my gosh. And depending on the other components of your application and depending on the reader, letters of rec may have different amounts of sway with with whoever reads them. So like at LSU, for example, for us, we have a committee of folks that read your app. So it's not going to be you're just trying to, talk to one person. We have a committee that maybe one person in the committee might see this and say, oh, that's awesome. I'm glad they said that. And someone else who may go, oh my gosh. And then the third, oh, let's talk about it. So there will be a conversation about, what you have for the entirety of your application. So remember, the letters of record are important, but they're not the whole packet that you're gonna have. So make the best possible choice that you can.
Samantha was asking if you were able to read it once it's submitted to LSAC, but if you waived your rights, then you're unable to read it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I will say that I'm not on that side of the fence. So I don't know all of the rules and regulations. When you go to the LSAC website, I would see there's probably a big list of FAQs. I would see if someone's asked that in regards to letters of recommendation and, and go from there. And if not, you can call them, you can reach out to them and ask questions. So.
Yeah, and then they just wanted to confirm that you do recommend that they waive their rights so that they can't read it.
That's I don't say that that's my personal recommendation. That's what most of what I when I researched for this particular topic, that was the response from from most persons and places that you decide to waive them. I know I would want to see what they're writing about me too, and I wish I could tell you guys who the professors are that write crappy letters of recommendation. But that's why I'm saying talk to your pre-law advisors because they might know and they might be able to tell you.
All right, well, thank you so much, Daphne, for coming here today and giving us
All right.
your presentation. I'm going to drop Daphne's email into the chat, and I'm also going to put a post-event survey. If everybody gets a chance to fill it out, it would really help us out. And thank you all so much for coming today.
All right. And look, I put our website in there so that if you want to look at the website and see anything, and this is something I want to just tell you guys to make sure you do. I think that your university is going to host a graduate and professional schools fair this year. If you get a chance, go by. There will be law schools there probably. And you can get a chance to kind of to meet some folks while you're there.